brief whirlwind tour of my career since I left Birmingham University. I did economics and politics there. I went on to do a master's in international political economy at LSE, and I found the postgraduate qualification really enthralling and gave me a major advantage in the job market, and really took my knowledge and confidence about the issues to another level. So that was certainly something I really enjoyed. I then started working for the British government in international development, and worked for a couple of think tanks and policy places because I was just very interested in how public policy can shape the world, both international in terms of international development, but also stuff in the UK. I did a lot of work on housing policy, on construction and real estate policy. And then ultimately decided that I wanted to take my education to the next level. And so I enrolled in a PhD program here in New York. And in 2008, at the age of 27, I moved to New York City and had an amazing time over the next 4 years, graduated with my doctorate. And in the meantime, worked for a few investment houses and think tanks as an intern because I was a student, and also worked full-time at the headquarters of the United Nations here in New York. And ultimately, through an accident of history and a complicated situation that I won't go into, I ended up leaving the kind of policy world behind and moving into finance. Now, I'd done a few internships in, as I say, in finance, and I had certainly had elements of my PhD that were finance related. But ultimately, I found myself at JP Morgan as what we call a global macro strategist. So what that is in effect kind of like an in-house academic, someone who is on hand to talk with clients and anyone internally who wishes to discuss the issues of the day. My job is very broad, so we could talk about any issue in the economy. We could talk about any issue, any political issue, any kind of election upcoming, any kind of controversial issue, or anything that is happening with the markets, where interest rates and where the equity market is, for example. And I found that a really great job for me because I was coming out of an academic program, and it's a job that I felt that I could add real value straight away. And I've now been at JP Morgan for 7 years, and ultimately my job is still the same, and that is to understand the world and be an expert for anyone who wants to debate any issue going on with the world, any big issue that clients may face. Ultimately, at the moment, I've actually moved into something called thematic investing, which is where you invest around a theme. So think of a theme as maybe being clean energy or cloud computing, genetic therapy, these kind of things, electric vehicles, and helping our clients get exposure to those themes. And I think that's a really thrilling job because you basically get to you think about the major drivers of the world, the things that are going to change the world, not just next year, but over the next, say, 10 years, and work out the best way for people to get exposure to that theme. And when we say get exposure, we mean make an investment and often support that theme. You often can say that your money is going to help push this theme forward. And there are some very worthwhile themes that I just listed. So I think thematic investing is a really interesting future for the finance industry. One thing I will just mention before I finish and move on to the next question is I actually work in asset and wealth management. I don't work for an investment bank. Now, JP Morgan's a big place. We have the world's largest investment bank, JP Morgan. But we also have a consumer bank, mainly in the United States, although you may have seen that JP Morgan just released a digital bank in the UK. Maybe everyone should check it out. But also we have a very large asset and wealth management arm. Now, I didn't know anything about the finance industry. I had no idea what an investment bank was or what an asset manager was when I started. But briefly, an investment bank is something which really helps companies do things that they want to do, like merge or issue bonds or issue stock or IPO for the first time, right? Asset and wealth management is managing assets or wealth, right? It's not rocket science, it's, as the name would suggest. And that is something that asset management will do for individuals or will do for pension funds or sovereign wealth funds. Wealth management focuses on endowments, foundations, and the very wealthy people of the world. So important clarification between the two. Investment banking tends to be really intense, very highly rewarded for sure, but all about deadlines to get certain corporate actions complete. Asset and wealth management tends to be a little calmer, focused more a little bit on the longer term, and about managing existing assets as a portfolio. So the two things are very different. One is about transactions, the other one is about managing assets. I found my favorite aspect of finance, or the one that works better for me, is in asset and wealth management. That's where I find most useful, and that's where I am today. Back to you, Clay.
Lovely. Thank you so much for that. That was so informative. You said about how useful your postgraduate studies were. By that, do you mean the subject? Is it political economy that you said you did?
Yeah.
Or was it just the depth of the research? Because my understanding is that at a postgraduate level, you go a lot more in depth than you would at an undergraduate. Which part of that was the most useful?
Well, I think for me, for both. So absolutely, a postgraduate degree is more intense than an undergraduate degree. It's often quite challenging to go from an undergraduate degree to a postgraduate because your final year will be very intense. You'll have to study very hard. I don't know which year everyone on the line is currently in, but if you're not in your final year, let me assure you that it will be challenging and stressful, and I'm sure you will want to do well, and you'll study very hard for your finals. And then you're asked to go up a level, and that's what you need to do for postgraduates. Study. I absolutely loved the subject matter I was learning about. I thought it was fascinating, very important for the world. I felt that there was obviously some benefit to me, that there were lots of careers that would be aided by taking this postgraduate course, and I was right. And I think that people should seriously consider it. I know that a lot of people may be looking at the end of uni as like, oh, thank God, I can stop studying. I can kind of start my real life. I can maybe earn a little bit of money or whatever. But I would say that if you have a real intellectual passion, if you really like learning and you feel that you want to go to the next level, then I would encourage everyone here to at least consider a postgraduate qualification and doing it straight after your undergrad, because it does give you, I think, an extra level of credibility with employers. And I frankly was amazed how many important things I was only kind of exposed to in the postgraduate. Not that I had no kind of knowledge of, or was not kind of given any kind of teaching in the undergraduate, even at a fine institution like the University of Birmingham. So I think that really, Chloe, that really, it really helped me get to a level where I was very confident that I was a genuine expert on those issues, and I loved it. So maybe I was a little bit of an aberration, because I really enjoyed the subject matter, and that wasn't always the case. I was a sportsman in school and was very focused on social activities, so we say. But in Birmingham, I suddenly realised I had very keen interest in the future of the world, and that's what political economy is about. It's about the future of the world. So whatever you're studying, I think that really set me up, and I would encourage people to look at it.
Lovely, thank you. This is possibly the wrong phrase to use, but you sort of moved around a few jobs before you went into JP Morgan. There's some quite varied experience in there. Do you feel that stood you in really good stead for what you're doing now, compared to, say, going straight into JP Morgan on a grad scheme and just working your way up the company? Like, what do you feel is the advantage of the way that you did it?
That's a great question, and I think it keys off a lot of interesting and difficult choices that everyone here will have to make in the next couple of years. Look, firstly, is no one would ever draw up their career to go how mine did, but you don't get to, right? You don't get to know what doors are going to open, that you don't get to know your own view about a certain subject that you're in. Maybe you love the first couple of years in your job, and maybe you don't, you want to do something else. I think also that life can sometimes mean that you take choices which impact your career, but maybe not purely for your career. Let me be clear what I mean. And just obviously, this is being recorded. You can speak. You're gonna play it back as you want, but still, quite a private admission I will make is that when I left London to move to the US to do my PhD, it was mostly because I wanted to get out of London, and I was in a relationship which was great, but it wasn't going anywhere. I was in a job which was good, but it wasn't really going anywhere. I felt I was getting kind of sucked into living forever in London when I'd always wanted to live somewhere else in the world. And the PhD, as well as making good career sense, I thought, was very a personal choice about where I wanted to spend the next few years. So there may be, you can look at people's careers and think, oh, this was always a clear calculation as to what it would mean for their career. A lot of people are forced to make choices which impacts their career, which are not, purely about the career. Now, it's a strong point if you can go through life making very considered choices that just about your career. But you may feel like I did, that you really wanted to change things up for personal reasons. And so that's, I think, maybe explains some of the sharp turns I've taken in my life. To come to your question maybe more directly, look, if you can work out what you like and get into that field quickly, then of course it's a benefit, because you develop experience, you're likely to get to certain levels of seniority quickly. And if your goal is solely progression in a career, and partly that can be about money, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to have a good standard of living and look after your family. It could be about progression and seniority. If you're going into, say, medicine, you go through different tiers of being a doctor, and that's a sign of progression, and you get to do more interesting things. For whatever reason why you really want to get on in your career, in your field, and getting into it early and staying there is obviously the best plan. And when I say getting in early, that may still be after a postgraduate degree. It might make a lot of sense to take that year, get a master's on something you're really interested in, then find a career, and then you end up staying there. I would say that the way that I've done it, or ended up doing it, reflects firstly that something like economics is applicable to a lot of different things, right? You can go into government, into policy, into academia, into a think tank, and into finance. And a lot of subjects, I have no idea what people are studying, do have lots of applications. So you can do. It may seem, as you said, Chloe, that I've done a lot of different things. And I have, but in each of the jobs, you've still been basically looking at the world, trying to work out what's going on. You can come up with a policy recommendation or an investment recommendation. You still got to understand the world and what's going on. So it may seem more different than it is. In that way. The last thing I would say is that I've had a really interesting life and career, and that's because what I've done a lot of different things in a lot of different places and worked with a lot of different people. And it's not just kind of what you're doing. I would also say understand the difference between working in the public sector, the non-profit sector, and the private sector, and working for small organizations and large organizations. I've done it all. They all have their strengths and weaknesses. You learn a ton by being in each of those kind of combinations. Ultimately, right now, I've settled into a career in a very, very large private sector organization. And that's partly because I don't mind being in a large organization, get on well with people, don't mind being one of the team. And having structure, it's okay by me, right? You have to deal with the bureaucracy, but then that's a frustration of any organization. And the private sector, I could quite easily be working for an MP right now or for the United Nations, but I have liked the fast pace and the pressure that you see in a private organisation, and I'm not afraid of a lot of hard work. So that's probably why I'm here.
Thank you. Building on what you say about liking hard work and the fast-paced environment, how do you maintain a work-life balance? Like, you hear about people working at the likes of JP Morgan and working these insane hours, like 100-hour weeks. How do you manage to keep a life going on the side of that? Or indeed, do you not? Sorry if you don't.
Yeah. Maybe the answer is I don't. But no, so in all seriousness, like, firstly, there's a real difference here, Chloe, between asset and wealth management and investment banking. As I said, it's the investment bankers who have to get something done and in the client's inbox by 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Otherwise, the deal doesn't get done, right? They're the ones working until 2 a.m. to get some IPO to happen or some merger or whatever it is, right? Because they're deal orientated. If we don't get it done, the deal's not going to get done and no one gets paid their fees. I know several people, including a graduate the year below me, 2 years below me, in fact, from the University of Birmingham, graduated in economics. In fact, I will set you up for a next conversation with him. He's British. He lives here in New York. We're very good friends. He is incredibly successful. Incredibly successful. He is very senior at a top investment bank and now earns an incredible amount of money, way more than me, and I'm paid well, and is very highly respected in his organization. I also know that when we were in our 20s, both in London and in New York together, he worked until about 2 a.m. every single night and then had to be in the office by 8:30 every single day. And I could not have done it. No interest in it at all. I could not have done it. I had no interest, and he deserves every penny of what he earns today because of what he had to deal with to get to where he is today. Now, that sounds like the way you want to spend your 20s, and you want to make that kind of sacrifice, and he learned a lot, and he was involved in a lot of interesting deals. You had to make a lot of personal sacrifices to get there. That investment banking might be for you. And I say again, I'll set you up with a conversation with him. It's not for me, not for me at all. I don't want any piece of being that kind of junior investment banker whatsoever. Even the juniors here in asset and wealth management, they still work hard. Don't get me wrong, they still work hard. You'll work a 55-hour week or something like that, right? You need to be in a bit before 8, and you probably won't get out beyond before 6, but that's fine. You can still regularly meet people for dinner and have a life and play football after work and do these kind of things. If you're an investment banker, you do not, right? As also, if you're a top lawyer at a tip-top law firm, doesn't happen. Now, I wouldn't want to do that today, and I certainly didn't want to do it when I was in my 20s. I was wanted to look things a little bit more casual. So, you absolutely have to understand there is a clear trade-off, both in terms of your life and the work-life balance and money. And no matter what people say about it, the places where you get paid the most, not being an entrepreneur, that's very different, even though it's obviously incredibly hard work. But if you're going to work for an organization, you're going to earn a lot of money, work-life balance is going to be challenged, to say the least. And the rewards are often over the horizon into your mid-30s. But if you get there and you're very senior, then the rewards are fantastic. I wanted to go a different route. I would say, again, one of the ways to make a shortcut is to get a postgraduate qualification. That's I think one way to cut out some of that. But look, specifically about my question, about my work-life balance right now. Look, I am what they call a high-value employee because I have a doctorate and I am a thought leader in my organization. So I work hard, but I also have more control, I would say, over my schedule than a lot of people. I'm able, if I want to carve out time to exercise during the day. And I say, as I need to be at the office before 8, and I probably walk out at 5:36, something like that. So I'm able to do things in the afternoon. On the weekends, I do a lot of reading to try and keep up with what's going on in the world. So I feel I have a reasonable work-life balance, and I'm with an employer that certainly claims to value that and provides a lot of help and advice around that. But I will say this: if you want to be a leader in your field, you're going to have to work very hard. I don't care what field you're in. No one will give you leadership, and certainly you won't maintain leadership without working very hard. Now, that shouldn't mean total sacrifice of everything else. Firstly, if you have not time to exercise, that's unhealthy. You definitely want to do that. Secondly, we all have family and friends and other hobbies, and you need to find some balance there. And everyone should be doing things like charity work, which really, I think, help ground you and really help contextualize some of the struggles you might have in the rest of your life. But there will still be some sacrifices for the high-powered jobs, for the money, and for the leadership. And you should work out if you're that kind of person, because it's okay not to be. It's okay to hold down a reasonable job and emphasize lots of other aspects of life. There's a whole spectrum here. And as I say, like people like my friend Jonathan, who I was talking about earlier, they made a lot of sacrifices and had to work while being totally exhausted. Not once a week, but every night. And it's not something I could have done. And so I have great respect for people who took that path. It wasn't for me then, it's not for me now. But I seem to have found a nice level where I'm at a high-profile private firm where there's a lot of expectations of excellence in an industry where it's fast-paced and people expect a lot from me. But I don't feel that I don't have time to do other things, even though my job is quite all-encompassing. And I certainly would have more time for hobbies working somewhere else. I also wouldn't be as paid as well as I would, and I face that trade-off as everyone does.
Thank you. Just sort of generally on the subject of working, I take it you were working from home for most of the past year. How did you find that? And obviously you're back in the office now, so how have you and your colleagues adjusted just the transition back in? Did you prefer it? Do you prefer being in person?
I'll take your questions in order. I think initially I personally found it quite okay being at home. I found Zoom obviously a tremendous tool. I do some research and I watch markets and I talk to journalists and I talk to clients. All that can be done from a desk and a laptop and a Zoom connection. So I was okay with it. Really up until the beginning of this year. And I really then started to struggle mentally. I lost a little bit of motivation, some focus. I think it just came to I was just sick of it, just sick of being working at home and not seeing colleagues, right? And there is no substitute. So we, like many large organizations, have decided to make it clear that we are an office-based organization, that we expect people to spend the majority of their working week here, that we need that connection between people and teams, that juniors need to be mentored, and all of that is much better done in person. But at the same time, I think we're going back to 5 days a week. Everyone works from home 1 day a week now in a way that they didn't before the pandemic. I think that's a very, very good thing. And I personally think that 3 days is needed in the office. More than that's not. And I think as an organization, we've kind of now hit a good balance there. I think Apple also did it well. People may have read what Apple have done. They basically said to their employees, you're in the office on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, everyone. Because if you're going to come in, you have to have other people there to be around. So everyone's got to come in so they know everyone else is there. But you're working from home Wednesday and Friday. And I think that is a great way to do it, because you focus the social aspect. And people should understand, if you're going into, especially, or any company is a social body, but especially in a large company where you have so many people to interact with, it's very, very social. You need to have that engagement. And so I think we found a right balance at the moment. Yeah.
Lovely. So being back in person, like, you're obviously taking a lot of meetings and things while we're in COVID, but the nature of your role, like, what does a day in the life of your role look like? Are you more speaking to your colleagues and having meetings with them? Is it very client orientated? Just like, how would you imagine an average day to be for you?
Well, let me first address what an average day would be like for a strategist, which is a recognized kind of career in finance, both in the investment bank and asset and wealth management. So a strategist should have some mixture of research and client engagement. So pre-pandemic, when I was a more regular strategist, as I said, I moved to thematic investing recently, but a kind of regular strategist, I would be on the road 50% of the time, right? I'd be traveling the world talking to clients, which was a fantastic privilege. I traveled all over the UK initially, then all over Europe after that, eventually globally for JP Morgan, talking to clients. And that was really, a really fantastic privilege. And I really enjoyed that. So I think regular day, in the London office would be probably two client meetings, probably another couple of hours of internal meetings, either a discussion forum where we're trying to work out what our view is on the equity market, UK growth, Brexit, the American election, whatever issue we're talking about. And then, some significant time reading. And then probably an hour or so of something else to do with being part of JP Morgan community, maybe a meeting about, I'm part of a group internally which tries to ensure that that ethnic minorities have significant opportunities, going forward internally, and are mentored and are clear what their options are. So obviously, if you're involved with a group like that, the group has organizational meetings to set up events and these kind of things. So, part of that kind of charity work, part of that kind of role of casting a wider shadow, of being part of a community, will obviously take you into things which are not core to your job. And so some kind of balance there would be my usual day.
Lovely, thank you. We're going to open up to member questions now, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
So if members, you just want to type them in the chat and then I can ask them. We have already had one sent in, and that's, what is the part of your role that you enjoy the most?
Wow. I would personally say, some kind of combination of the client work. It's just client work takes many different faces. There's the one-on-one meetings in the office. There's the travel to meet clients internationally. There's presenting at major conferences, often up on a stage in front of 100 or 200 or 300 or 500 people. This is pre-COVID, and they've started to come back a little bit now. I also do some television work. And if your members want to Google my name with JP Morgan and go to videos, you'll see what I mean. I really enjoy that whole spectrum of client outreach, because I think the pressure that you feel when you're on television or on a big stage representing the firm is because you have the privilege of representing the firm in a big spot, right? In a big situation where it really matters. And I think that is exciting, and I get an adrenaline buzz, and I think it combines my skill set, which was kind of my thinking about getting the PhD. Is like, I have pretty good speaking skills, interpersonal skills, presentational skills. If I can now also combine that with the credibility of a PhD in economics, well, I mean, the combination would put me in a great place to be that kind of, the face of the franchise, as it were. That is ultimately the role that I've had now for JP Morgan for a while. Yeah.
Lovely. We've got one that says, you've spoken to this somewhat regarding the takeaway skills from a variety of careers, but how important do you believe it is for your undergraduate or postgraduate course to line up with the job that you may wish to do?
Very. Because, look, when you talk about postgraduate courses, a quick thing that I've worked out is that every postgraduate course except an MBA narrows you down a field, right? You're going to get a PhD in it because you're going to get a master's in economics or a master's in design or whatever it is. And so there's absolutely no point doing that unless you're very interested in it. And if you're very interested in it, then you're probably going to try and find a job in it. So absolutely, it should line up. There should be some intent to utilize those skills. Don't get me wrong, getting through a master's program, just like getting through an undergraduate program, is a life achievement in itself. Even if the degrees you're all taking didn't lead you to a career, it's still an achievement you should all be very proud of, and a life achievement. And my certificate from the University of Birmingham is on my parents' wall and has been framed since I graduated in 2003. Right next to it is my master's, and right next to it is the PhD. And regardless of what these things lead to, they should be seen as a life achievement, and also all the other things that come with it, the group of friends that you've made and the life connections. I'm going to get married next summer, and I can tell you that my best man is someone I met at Birmingham University. One of my groomsmen is also one of my closest friends from Birmingham University. That's 20 years ago. So this is, these are just as important. And I think postgraduate qualification will put you, in daily contact with some really smart, motivated people that are going places. Let's remember, I think the number is in the United States is only 8%. So they're probably the same number for the UK, where it's about 40% go to undergraduate. And how many people ever go to postgraduate? It drops down to single digits. I'm not sure, it's 6, 7, 8, something like that. PhD goes down to 0.1, right? So you're still putting yourself in the postgraduate qualification in that kind of at least 10% of people that are only going to that level. And that's obviously an interesting group of people you'll be around. So yes, you should align it with what you want to try and do, of course. But you shouldn't blind you from the other things that you're going to gain out of both the undergraduate and, I think, to an even more extreme case, the postgraduate degree. I think there's a lot of good things that come out of it.
Thank you. Our next question is, how wealthy does one have to be to get a wealth manager, roughly, or rather, when should one start to consider getting one?
There are kind of tiers in kind of levels that we split the world by, for sure. There's kind of regular wealth management, which will be anything from 100,000 pounds up to £500,000 of savings. After that, from about 500,000 to about 2 or 3 million, we would say that's called mass affluent. It's kind of an American term, but mass affluent. And then from 3 million to 25 million would be high net worth, and 25 million and up for us is ultra high net worth. Now, a bank like JP Morgan has different people and different systems for each of those tiers. Unsurprisingly, the higher you go up, the better the service becomes. But you can make a career in wealth management at servicing any of those tiers. And I have friends who do those other tiers. I tend to spend my time at the very top. Most of the clients I meet are most of them are billionaires. So, but that's just the little niche I'm in. But yes, wealth management in general is a tremendous growth area, right? Because the world continues to get more wealthy. Wealth tends to grow faster than the economy, and there's a tremendous need to manage a transfer of wealth as the baby boomers move on, and those their wealth gets transferred down the generations. And also, there's a real social aspect to this. Like, we have trillions and trillions of wealth out there. If we're going to fix things like climate change, if we can get that wealth invested in stuff that'll fix these issues, you can have an enormous impact. So yeah, lots of different tiers.
Lovely. We've got a question. Do you have any regrets about your career choices?
I've got a few. I've got a few question marks over some of the choice I made in hindsight, for sure. Leaving LSE was one of them. I left because I was kind of burnt out from studying 3 years at Birmingham straight into LSE. That's what I meant. It's quite hard. I felt a little jaded. But I thought about staying and doing a PhD. I decided not to. I wanted to get some work experience. I wanted to have a better income, and I think about what would have happened if I hadn't done that. If I kind of knew deep down, I knew I was very interested in doing a PhD. I probably, I'm not sure, should is the wrong word, but I'd be very, very interested to see where I'd be if I had stayed and done my PhD at LSE. So I think the lesson is there when you're in a really good organization, an institution, and you have the chance to stay, it should be something you really consider. I've also, I went to work for a think tank called the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, the RICS, some of you may know it, which was an interesting job, but was also, it was just a bit of a sleepy organization. I don't think it was a place for someone of real ambition. And I think it reflected at the time I was a little bit casual with with my career path. I was a little bit maybe you could say arrogant. I thought that it was just all going to work out. I think the lesson there is that every part of your career really matters. That you're young, fresh-faced, and in your undergraduate degree now, and you are the next generation. But within a couple of years, there's another generation coming behind you, and they're going to want all the benefits they can have for their careers. And if you kind of take a few years off, or you really decide, I don't know, if you really don't emphasize, if you're ambitious and you really don't think through how to advance your career, you can maybe not make the most of your time, put it that way. So potentially I should have gone into a little bit more of a dynamic environment. In that case, maybe some time in the private sector would have been the right case there. And probably some ways the biggest one, the biggest decision of my life was to quit my job, break up with my girlfriend of 6 years, who I met at Birmingham, and leave to the United States to do a PhD, and to do it at a university which a lot of people haven't heard of. I have a PhD from somewhere called the New School for Social Research. Having been at LSE, and to go to an organization which was not that prestigious was a big risk. And I think, as I said early on, I took that decision for a lot of personal reasons. I needed to get out fast. And, I would encourage everyone to be honest with yourself when you're in a comfort zone, when you're investing time in something you really don't think you want to be in for the long term, because you've got better things to do. And if you need to make a change, make it sooner rather than later. Now, it turns out that decision was probably the best decision I ever made in my life, because I had the 4 best years of my life here in New York City. It helped me become such a more of an open and welcoming person, and tolerant person, and happy-go-lucky person. And I ended up working at the United Nations headquarters. How incredible is that? What a privilege that is. And as you may realize from Googling me in the videos and where I am now, my career has worked out just fine. So it turned out to be the best thing, but I made a very large risk. What I will say to close this question, what all those choices had in common is I barely took any advice around them. I maybe had a few conversations with my parents, but I didn't really have a mentor. Now, just after I started at JP Morgan, I got some bad feedback. It's like, hey, David, some people got a problem with you. You're a little intense, or I don't know what the issues were, right? And they were like, look, this is a social place, a cultural place. You should get a mentor. And I was like, really? They're like, yeah, mentors are good. So they set me up with this senior guy, right? 20 years older than me, been at JP Morgan for a long time. And it just took a couple of conversations, we had a couple of coffees, for me to realize, oh my God, what was I doing? I was taking all these decisions without a mentor, without asking people who have experience, who know about these things. And so maybe one of the best advice I can give everyone on this call is find mentors, and find them now. A mentor should be at least 10 years older than you, preferably in a field you're interested in. A family friend is good. I'm sure your parents have got your friends that you've always kind of liked well with. It doesn't have to be in the same field, but someone, more than one. I now have 5 mentors, and it really is like, I feel like, Chloe, I took all these decisions with one hand behind my back. How the hell am I supposed to know in my 20s what the hell I'm supposed to do? You people, you don't have to know. It's okay not to know. It's not okay to not work out that you should have some senior people, some experienced people advising you. And that advice also can't come like this. They have to get to know you. So you have to work out now, not when you've got a decision that's got to be made this week. Which job offer do you take? Which masters are you going to do? Too late, way too late. You've got to work out now. And if there's homework, I love giving people homework. If there's homework for the 46 people I see on this Zoom, is by the end of this week, you should identify 3 people who are at least 30 years old, who you would like to develop a mentor-mentee relationship. And you should work out, and it should be like very clear that you're trying to gain an advantage over this complex decision that is life, a multiple decision game that is life. I cannot believe I went through all those decisions, all of which I took in my 20s, the thing I identified, without major senior advice. And it's not your parents. They are biased. You need neutral advice, getting to know you now as young adults who know your wants, and preferably some in the right sector, but others who are just senior, and make them successful. A lot of people out there are not really worth listening to. You want successful people, driven people, respected people, who can be your mentor, who can guide you through those difficult decisions. And it just takes a coffee or a phone call every few months. But then when you get to a decision point, you've got a week to decide something, or 2 weeks to decide something. Then you'll speak to them 2 or 3 times in a few days as you work through that decision together. It doesn't guarantee you'll take the right decision, but it is almost criminal to do what I did. Don't make that mistake. Find mentors, find them now, develop the relationship, and when you have the decisions, they'll be there for you to make them better.
Thank you for that. I don't think that a guest speaker has given us that advice before, so that's fantastic. The next question is, if you're interested in working in the United States for an investment bank or similar, would you suggest starting in London or the UK, or applying directly to the US office?
London and UK. It's almost impossible to get a direct job these days as a British national in the United States. I say almost. There's a visa called the H-1B, the high skilled visa application, which there's only 80,000 a year. They only open once. They're very, very hard to get. And with the greatest respect to everyone on this call, you're not going to qualify right now because you're not going to be categorized as high skill, right? So by far the best thing to do is to get a job with a large organization in London. After only 1 year, you'll be eligible for an L1 visa, an internal transfer visa. That's what I have. And they'll be able to move you to the United States. Now, it's not quite that easy, don't get me wrong. But the bottom line is, if working outside of the UK is something that really excites you, one great way to do it, 2 great ways to do it are, 1, education, back to the postgraduate degree. If you're going to do a master's, do it in America, right? That's obviously there's a handful of other universities around the world, but there's a ton of them, great universities in America, great thing to do straight out of Birmingham, go do a master's in the States, awesome, what a fantastic decision. Secondly, obviously work for a big organization. It could be the public sector or the private sector. The guy who's going to be one of my groomsmen at my wedding, who I met at Birmingham, he and his wife met at the Foreign Office. And he's been working at the Foreign Office now for 20 years. He did politics at Birmingham, got a job at the Foreign Office, and he's lived in Hong Kong, Rome, Iraq, like all kinds of interesting places. His wife worked in Beijing, speaks Chinese. So a large organization, finance obviously has large banks, the government with the Foreign Office, but there are major large companies that will move you around. And I think that is one of the benefits of maybe going into a large organization at a junior level. Is there are some negatives to it, for sure. One of the benefits is that they probably can move you after just a year or 2 in London, and probably move you more than once in your 20s. And if I look at people who nailed their 20s, a lot of them have worked for organizations that moved them a couple of places. They lived a couple of years in Singapore, a couple of years in you name it, America, whatever. But if you can live in 2 or 3 of the world's major cities by the time you're 30, that is a fantastic way to spend your 20s. Like the friends you will make all over the world, the experience of culture that you'll have, and the richness of your own character that will be fantastic. And to go back to the original point of this question, it's not easy. I mean, it used to be easy to go work in Europe, but Brexit screwed that up, didn't it? So, even Europe's gone now, which is really annoying, and I feel sorry for you lot for not having that. It's a disgrace. And it's not very easy to go elsewhere. You can kind of go to Australia, but look, it's not that easy, and it's much easier if you're being sponsored by an organization. So I think it's an explicit thing. The ability of an organization to take you around the world should be something you consider if it matters to you. Maybe a lot of people on this call doesn't matter to, and that's totally fine. Most of my British friends have not left the country. But I think maybe about the 1 in 3 that did, I would say that we had a much richer experience in our 20s. We tend to settle down in terms of marriage and kids later because you're off around the world having fun. And I think looking back, I say when my big decision to move to the States was partly, it's like, crap, I'm 27, I haven't lived anywhere else, I really wanted to, and I went and did it, and it was the best decision I ever made. Looking back, I probably should have realized that there's more to life in London. I can tell you I was exactly where you were in 2002, 2003, where loved Birmingham, had a great time. When I went down to London, I was like, wow, it's London. Oh, I can't wait to get there. I grew up in Kent, Tunbridge Wells, an hour outside of London. Oh, it's the big city, it's London. I can't wait to get to London. I'm sure most people on this call are very excited about graduating and getting to London. I did my master's in London at LSE. Great time. Those first couple of years, they're not the problem. That's a fantastic decision to make. But after that, it'd be great to have options, wouldn't it? And the right company will then give you options to move around the world. That's great options to have. I didn't have them until I was 27. I freaked out a little bit. I had to go to America and do it myself. So that's probably the best way to do it. Almost impossible to go and get a job out right now in America. Very hard. Better way, if you want to go to America right now, work out a master's program.
Thank you for that. We've probably got time for 1, potentially 2 more questions. So one that's been submitted, sort of building on what you were talking about with mentors, is how do you start networking at the beginning of your career, like when you're our age?
Well, I mean, firstly, you are all doing better than I did by being a member of this society. I wasn't a member of society. I was probably too busy partying or playing football. So well done on showing effort. It is tough. I mean, look, that's why when I sat down, and much later in age, I realized that I had some kind of relationship with all the people who ended up being my mentors. Because 2 of them were mothers of friends of mine. Actually, 4 out of my 5 mentors are women, right? And so that's probably the clearest pool, right? Think about either friends of your parents or parents of your friends, and work out who you think, even with initial impression that you've been impressed by, that really has their act together, that appears switched on, that maybe has done something really interesting, that is successful in whatever field. It doesn't have to be financially, right? It can be in whatever field. Think about someone that you look up to and respect. And it only takes 1 or 2. And I'm sure, like, if they won't say yes to being a mentor, then they're not the right people to be mentors. I think, and then if there's only 1 or 2, you can go from there and ask who would they have anyone else who might consider being a mentor, because it's really good initially for this other person, these mentors, to be a kind of clean slate. You don't want someone that knew you when you were a kid. You certainly don't want family. You want someone coming in now, getting to know you now and your goals now, and someone who's proven in navigating this crazy life that we're all going into. That's why I say at least 10 years older than you, at least, right? You need someone. Also, you need someone who doesn't view you as a competitor, right? So there's nothing there as well. It's completely neutral. That's the best kind of a relationship, because it will be 100% advice led and about your own benefits. Look, and look, feel free to reach out to other to people who you meet casually. But I know that also in this life, if you're reaching out to lots of people on LinkedIn, it often doesn't do very well. People on LinkedIn, especially if you have a high profile, as I do, have hundreds of requests, and it's just impossible to meet them all. But I would start. It just takes one. Reach out to one person you respect or who's in the right field, and go from there. And I often ask them, "Hey, I'm looking to take on some more to build a relationship with people who can advise me here." Firstly, you'll come across as incredibly thoughtful and articulate and mature to be doing this at your age. And I think that is the benefit here. There's no downside to doing this. This is only upside, because you're going to work out that I'm right. You can either work out when I did, when I was 36, or you can work it out now and gain all the benefits.
Perfect, thank you. We've got 3 minutes left, so we've got time for one more quick question.
Sure.
Besides education, what do you think is the best investment for someone in their 20s?
Travel the world. Physical accomplishments, right? Obviously it's a cliche. As you get old, like, you can't do what you did physically. I never ran a marathon. I could now, but it's going to be a lot easier when I was in my 20s. So if you if you think climbing a mountain is going to be really good, or doing marathons or whatever, physical accomplishments, do them now, because it's easiest when you get into your mid-20s. What else? That's travel, physical accomplishments. Invest in the friendships that you really think have got longevity. You'll never have more friends than the day you leave uni, because all your uni mates are there. All your schoolmates are still close because you didn't leave school that long. Most of them are going to end up in London, and you'll never have more friends. But there'll only be like a small fraction of those that you'll be friends with on your 40th birthday. It's good to always think every now and then who's going to be in it for the long haul. So that's always a good thing. And just try to read and learn as much as you can. Podcasts are like the world's greatest resource of free information. I absolutely love them. Chloe, I can circulate a list through you to the community of ones I regularly listen to. I didn't have any of this stuff when I was your age. I didn't have YouTube, didn't have this kind of stuff. The free knowledge at your fingertips is exceptional. Get a subscription to The Economist. Read it every week. These kind of things. It's okay. It's okay to be fairly junior in your first jobs. Of course, you will be. It's not okay to not prepare yourself for being leaders. A lot of people on this call are going to be leaders. You're going to be a leader if you work hard. You're going to be a leader if you learn every moment you can, and if you take advice from mentors and build long-lasting friendships. Then you will all be leaders in whatever field you want to be. I wish you all luck, and it's been really fun talking to you all.
Thank you so